Welcome to the Broncos Podcast with Troy Renck. I'm your host, Troy Renck from the Denver Post. It is a disappointing Saturday night here in downtown Cincinnati. Just walked back from the stadium after the Broncos' latest heart-in-a-blender loss, 30-24 in overtime to the Cincinnati Bengals. And frankly, one of the oddest, weirdest Bronco games I have covered in my essentially 15 years of covering them on an annual basis, dating all the way back to part of like the 93 season, 96 through 2000, and 2014 to the present. Not many games have been as odd as that one. Certainly not many with the stakes involved, where a win and the Broncos would have advanced to the playoffs for the first time since 2015. Instead, here we are. And then there was one. The Broncos have one opportunity left. Beat the Chiefs, presumably who will be playing their backups. Beat the Chiefs. We don't know that game's going to be on Saturday or Sunday. Beat them at home, and you go to the playoffs for the first time since Super Bowl 50. Lose, and it goes down as one of the all-time collapses, regardless of expectations of the season. Given the nature of the first two games, you should have beaten the Chargers. The Bengals tried to give you this game, and then if you were to lose to Carson Wentz and a host of reserves from the Chiefs, ouch. There is pain, and then there is a cheese grater along your shins. But, folks, that was a tough one. It was a fascinating game. Those are one of those games that will be a lot more fun to watch than to write about, because writing a column, you're dealing with outcome. You need outcome because you're taking a side. And my column, it will be in the Denver Post. It's on the 1A page if you pick up the paper. And when you write for 1A, and I'll get into it more after the break, but it's a different audience, so it's less in the weeds football, more about the big picture of they lost and they still have a chance for the playoffs. But you go from having 2 hours to write a column, then it goes into overtime with nearly soaks the complete clock in overtime. Then you're down to basically having 45 minutes to write 1,000 words. And I'm used to that, but it's different when you're writing a column on deadline as opposed to a game story and or feature. But that's what makes it fun, the adrenaline of it. It's just, can the Broncos ever have an easy game? Can anything go easily for this team? The answer to that is no. So Broncos country, hang in there. They still have a great chance to finish this, but man, does this hurt. Broncos lose in overtime to the Bengals, and Joe Burrow get walked off by T. Higgins, lose 30-24. How did it happen? What were the highlights, the lowlights, and what's up next? Was the Broncos still trying to reach the playoffs? We'll get to all of it after a quick break. Have you been injured in a car wreck or hurt at work? What are you waiting for? Give my friends at Hoggett Injury Law a call. Their motto, with us, it's personal. That's because it is. Listen, I've known Darby Hoggett forever. We traveled the country, including here to Cincinnati, to watch our boys play baseball. We became good friends. Many of Darby's clients become good friends. You don't even have to pay Darby up front. If your case goes as planned, Darby will be the one writing checks to you. So again, if you've been hurt at work or injured in a car wreck, give Darby a call. His team is at 1-833-HOGGATT. That's 1-833-HOGGET. Or visit the website at hoggettlaw.com. BetOnline continues to be the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. From the earliest odds to in-game live betting, BetOnline provides you with all the action and the ability to watch the games as they happen. They have the largest selection of odds on everything from football, the NBA, college hoops, NHL, even UFC. Head to BetOnline today, and don't forget, use that promo code BELIEVE, B-L-E-A-V, that's B-L-E-A-V, for your welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline. The game starts here. Well, the misery continues here. Welcome back to the Broncos Podcast with Troy Renck. I am your host, Troy Renck, from the Denver Post. And listen, this one's a hard one to wrap your head around if you're a Broncos fan, because realistically, the Broncos were not going to be a playoff team this year. Realistically, on paper, they weren't going to beat the Bengals. I picked them in my reverse lock theory dating to my baseball days because everything said they were going to get smoked. Bengals offense is on an all-time heater with Joe Burrow and T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, and they're a pretty good running team as well. But they're on an all-time heater, folks. And if you look at the inconsistency of the Broncos offense the last few weeks, they're going to get smoked. They had a chance to win this game. Zach Taylor coached the Broncos back into the game, frankly, on multiple occasions, a couple of bad fourth down plays, and then who knows what the Bengals are trying to do at the end of that game. So, how did we get here? Let's go to the end, the fourth quarter, overtime, because that's really when you talk to friends, you're at the water cooler. That's what this is about. Is the Broncos are trailing. It's 24-17. And how did they get to this point? Well, again, it's tie game, 17-17. Bo Nix has rejuvenated the offense in the second half, back-to-back scoring drives with a touchdown high point pass to Cortland Sutton. And then he throws a 51-yard absolute moonball, his best moonball of the season. 51-yard scoring toss to Marvin Mims Jr., who, again, has come out of witness protection these last few games and really become a weapon. Mims finished 8 catches, 103 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So we'll get to the second one. But it's 17-17. The Broncos, you feel like, hey, they got a shot here. They got a shot. They did not play well in the first half. You don't score a touchdown in the first half against Joe Burrow, you figure you've got no chance to win. So under that context and in that context, Broncos, they're close. They're close. They're getting dominated statistically in the first half. Their defense has these 2 fourth down stops with some bad play calls, one bad pass. But one of the drives was a 17-play drive with no points for the Bengals. So the Broncos, they get these stops, but they can't get off the field, so it's limiting the possessions of the offense. And then in one case, they have that 17-play possession, and then the Broncos offense answers with a 3-and-out, and here come the Bengals go down and score a touchdown. But it was 10-3. And so in the second half, they tied at 10. Higgins goes back up with a touchdown, 17-10. Then Mims makes it 17-17. And then here are the Bengals driving. Joe Burrow, who's now had 8 straight games with at least 250 yards passing and 3 touchdowns. And he absolutely was spewing lava against the Broncos. 39 of 49, 412 yards, 3 touchdowns. So, yeah, the Broncos' defensive struggles continue, even with Riley Moss back. Moss said after the game, because T. Higgins just had him for lunch, 11 catches, 131 yards, 3 touchdowns. And I'm not going to tell you I told you so, but he's a guy I wanted the Broncos to trade for. Now, he wasn't available. He should become a free agent. I don't know that they will franchise tag him, especially with Jamar Chase in line for a record-breaking contract. If T. Higgins is available and I'm the Broncos, I'm going after him. I'm not finding the answer in the draft. The answer in the draft is at tight end with Loveland or Warren, the kid from Michigan or Penn State. You go after a T. Higgins, that's what a 1 could look like, with all due respect to Cortland Sutton. But Burrow, absolutely kills it. Higgins, 11 for 131. Chase, 9 for 102, but only like 27 of those yards came against Pat Surtain. But Riley Moss came back, and my God, he was involved in like every play. It was like watching a Pop Warner. He's in run support. He's blitzing. He's in man coverage. He's winning battles. He's getting interference. Like he was like this Gordie Howe hat trick of, I don't think there was anything he didn't do on the football field, good or bad. And he said afterwards, like sometimes you have to eat a shit sandwich. I mean, and he did. You got to stand up and admit he got owned by Higgins. Higgins owned. So, but it was so bizarre. The Bengals, again, it's 17-17. The clock's running down. And they get to a point with Brown, the running back, he's going to score, and he goes down. He goes down on the play to keep the clock running. The Broncos only have 1 timeout. Well, in the process of Brown trying to stop, he hurts his ankle, and the linemen are trying to carry him off the field, and he can't get up, and so it stops the clock. They're charged with a timeout because of the injury. And you're like, that was weird. He probably should have just scored the touchdown. And then on the very next play, they score a touchdown. And we're like, what is going on? You tell the one guy not to score, then you get to the 1-yard line, and now you are going to score? So you score with 1:29 left, make it 24-17, but now the Broncos are going to get the ball back with like 1:25 and 1 timeout. Just bizarre. Again, Taylor was not making sense to me at the end of that game. If you're going to tell one running back to go down, why would you score on the next play? You take the clock down again. Anyway, they end up scoring. Broncos get it back. And what could have been, just like the Chiefs, game earlier this season, the defining drive of Bo Nix's career. Again, it does end up showing why he's the guy. You got your franchise quarterback. But Bo Nix drives them down, just absolutely throwing dimes, and he gets to way down with 8 seconds left. You got no timeouts, obviously, at this point. Throws up a 50-50 ball to Marvin Mims Jr. in the corner of the end zone, and he jumps over Mike Hilton for the 25-yard touchdown. Easily the best play of Mims' career. He's had longer catches, the 93-yarder against Cleveland and this 51-yarder tonight. But in terms of that moment, the stakes, two guys kind of bracketed him going up and making a catch. And now it's 24-23, 8 seconds left, and here we go. And you're watching at home, folks. Part of me, again, I'm on deadline, so I'm like trying to watch and I'm trying to type. And it's not an excuse. I'm just saying sometimes I see the game way better when I'm at home watching it than when I'm writing about it, because you get on deadline and you've got to be like literally knowing what you're writing. And so here we are with 24-23, 8 seconds left, a chance to win it. And Bo Nix is signaling two fingers. You got other players thinking there's going to be a 2-point conversion. And Sean Payton decides to kick and go into overtime. And I'd normally say, just like when Jay Norvell did it against CU 2 years ago, the visiting team, you have a chance to win it and finish a team off at their part. Do it. Do it. And but the math was different here. Let's be fair. The calculus was two things that Sean Payton said. They had momentum going into overtime. So if you get the ball in overtime, you feel like, I don't think a touchdown, but you go get a field goal and a tie game, you still go to the playoffs. So if you're thinking we're going to get the possession and we're going to go down the field, get a field goal, all we have to do is prevent the Bengals from getting a touchdown. So even a field goal, a tie, you're going to the playoffs. So he felt like they had enough momentum, and he felt like and admitted the tie played into it. I understand that logic. I'm not going to kill him for that. Why it surprises me is because this is a guy that has no mildness to his method. It's a madness, but no mildness. He is aggressive. I know he was upset with what I wrote over the Chargers game, over his clock management at the end of that first half when, you get a -3 completion to Javonte Williams, and now you're down to like 17 seconds. And they're not calling a timeout. Just let it run out. Go in at halftime up 21-10. And his belief, and he said it later in a presser, that, hey, I'm aggressive. We're going to go for it. It's aggressive. We always go for aggressive. It's the NFL. Well, here's your chance. 24-24, 8 seconds left in regulation. 24-23. You have a chance to put your foot on their throat, win and go to the playoffs, knowing that in your back pocket you've got the Chiefs playing their mostly reserve players. It just surprises me, knowing who Sean Payton is and his posture, that he didn't go for two. I understand why he didn't, because of the element of the tie, because feeling like you might be able to get a field goal. If the Bengals get it first, you hold them to a field goal, then you come down and kick a field goal. At that point, you feel. But again, the problem with this is, your defense was getting absolutely worked by Joe Burrow. The overall, you have 34 first downs, 499 total yards. The Bengals ran 84 offensive plays compared to Denver's 60. They netted 115 on the ground, netted 384, because the Broncos had 6 sacks of Burrow. Unfortunately, he didn't turn it over on a sack, which he's done, I think, 7 times this year on fumbles. But Burrow, absolutely just is on a heater, an all-time heater. Again, 8 straight games, 250 yards, 3 touchdowns. Broncos end up losing it. And you say, like, there's nothing good that comes from this. Well, I would disagree with that. When you look at what Bo Nix did specifically in the second half. So if we go to the game book here and you look at Bo Nix's first half stats, nothing that you would want to remember. It's 10-3, they're losing. The Broncos have barely had the ball. In the first half, the Broncos only had the ball, 3 times, I think, in the first half? 3 possessions? They didn't have the ball. And so when you look at the first half stats, Bo Nix, 10 for 12, 68 yards, no touchdowns. And Burrow at that point is 15 for 20, 121 and a touchdown. You're in it because your defense got 2 fourth down stops in the red zone. But the defense has also left you vulnerable because they can't get off the field. But then the offense isn't helping the defense by, after a 17-play drive by the Bengals, the offense turns around and goes 3 and out. And then the Bengals come right back down, drive 7 plays, and get that touchdown to put them up 10-3. But Bo Nix at halftime, 10 for 12 for 68 yards. I mean, you're not going to win any games on the road against Joe Burrow doing that. But his overall stats, 24 of 31 for 219 yards. 51 was the long to Mims, 3 touchdowns. Again, a touchdown to Sutton and 2 touchdowns to Mims. Mims goes over 100 yards. So you look at the second half, and you're talking about, 32 plus, so right at 155 yards in the second half passing. Much more efficient in terms of vertical strikes. But there's just issues with the play calling. The Broncos end up 27 of 123 on the ground, but they just get away from the run at a time when they need to slow the game down and run the ball. Payton cannot help himself. Jaleel McLaughlin returns. He's 10 carries, 69 yards. Javonte Williams didn't have a carry. Now this, again, not personal against him. This should have happened weeks ago. Estimate 9 for 24. Bo Nix 7 for 31. But the problem is when you go away from the run and it doesn't become your identity, or at least part of your identity, in that overtime period, on one drive, or certainly their last drive, they get the ball back, 2:33 left in overtime. What do you need to do there? You need to be able to run the football. That's what in December and January in the NFL. You have to run when you want to. You have to run when you have to. They had to run there. You get a first down running, the game's going to be over, folks. It's going to be over. And then you're stealing one because it should have been over in regulation with the Bengals never making it to overtime. But you got a game that goes off the rails because you got a kick that goes off the uprights. But if you were going to score, you should have had your first running back score, and then you have your second run. I mean, Zach Taylor's trying to coach the Broncos back into the game. And then the Broncos under Payton, there's just enough inconsistency in approach that won't work with the current roster as constructed. Payton could get away with some of this stuff when you had Kamara, you had Ingram, you had Michael Thomas, you had Jimmy Graham, you had Marcus Colston. He doesn't have those. So there's no one to, basically put Revlon on these blemishes. There's no one there to do that. And so every drive becomes amplified in these close games, and there's just enough inconsistency with Payton. Whether the inconsistency of a guy who defines himself by aggression, not going for 2, or a guy who won't stick with the run when it's clearly working, then when you need it, you're not able to do it, or being conservative, passing horizontally in the first half, finally realizing, we got to go vertical against this Bengals team that everyone has seemingly done because they're terrible defensively. And eventually it catches back. It catches back up with you, and it did. So here we are, folks. Here we are. Disappointment. The sting is real. And you need one more win. And normally, if you would tell me before a season, and I predicted before the season the Broncos would lose these final 3 games, but I had them at 6 wins. So listen, I was wrong. But there's times that when you watch this team, you're like, man, they have changed. They have beat bad teams. They're so much better than they were a year or 2 years ago. They're turning the corner. And then you watch them do get stupid defensive penalties, get worked at times. I mean, they've got to improve at linebacker, folks. I know you like Cody Barton. I get it. They've got to get a coverage linebacker. They're so vulnerable to crossing routes. And Moss didn't play well. I mean, part of it was just it's a bad matchup to come back to after not playing for 3 weeks. But you see this team and you're like, they're not a playoff team. They're just not enough weapons. They need more offensive playmakers. If Payton is going to continue to call games the way he calls them, he needs better personnel. And so you need a tight end, you need a true number one receiver to pair with Sutton, and now here we go. And you're going to have to draft a running back to compete with an Estime, and McLaughlin will have like the change of pace gadget role, and that gives you a shot. But we watch the team, and you're like, they're so much better. Then you see it like on times on Saturday night, and you're like, they don't deserve to be in the playoffs. They're not good enough. Anytime they play a good team, for the most part, they lose. Now they're competitive outside a couple games, but they lose. So if you had told me, Troy, it's going to come down to the Broncos needing to beat the Chiefs to get into the playoffs, I would have taken that before the season if I'm the Broncos. And the qualifier being that they're going to face Carson Wentz. I mean, Andy Reid in every situation like this, locking up the number one seed as a coach of the Chiefs, he's always rests his starters. He always rests his starters. So that means that we should see a team of reserves with a few starters sprinkled in for the Chiefs. He did it. Paxton Lynch's, was that his rookie year where Paxton Lynch played against Patrick Mahomes and lost in a really competitive game. But subbing in Carson Wentz for Patrick Mahomes, that's the equivalent in an action movie of putting Fred Flintstone in as the leading man for The Rock. Like, if you can't beat Carson Wentz, I'm sorry. You don't deserve to go to the playoffs. And that's going to sound disrespectful toward Carson Wentz. I don't care. Wentz has been basically out of the league. He's been an absolute no one for a few years. He was nearly the MVP with the Eagles. Then Nick Foles comes in. They win the Super Bowl. It gets sideways there. He was never the same, bouncing around, and he just hasn't been the same guy. And now he's a backup of the Chiefs. Cushy job that a lot of guys have held and barely play. And sometimes the only time they play is the last game of the season because the Chiefs are the 1 seed. So I would expect we don't see Chris Jones because he's dealing with an injury and did not play against the Steelers. I would expect we don't see Travis Kelce because of the age and wear and tear. It makes no sense to put him at risk for injury. And I would suspect we don't see Patrick Mahomes or their entire offensive line. Maybe we see one of the left tackles getting some reps, like a DJ Humphries if he comes back. Because people are like, well, they're not going to rest 23 days. That's too long to be off, given they played on a Wednesday. And then you rest against the Broncos in your first round bye. I'm just telling you what Andy Reid has done. I just cannot see him putting his starters at risk. Is there a world where he plays them a half? Yeah. I mean, he could. Treat it like a first preseason game. I'm going to play him 2 or 3 series. He could. And the Broncos had played the Chargers like this in a similar situation a few years ago, and Brandon Staley did it, and he got Mike Williams hurt. And they needed Mike Williams where they end up blowing the lead against the Titans in the playoffs. Or, the Jaguars in the playoffs. So I don't see it. And it comes back to the fact if you can't beat Carson Wentz, you don't deserve to get in the playoffs. But, folks, we got some issues here, too. While Bo Nix's future is bright, and you look at some of the stuff he's done as a rookie and the numbers he's put up, it's hard not to feel good about the future. I said it after the Kansas City loss. I thought that loss was going to be the reason they got to the playoffs. That loss and that drive showed who Bo Nix was. And now he's up to 25 touchdowns and 12 picks. He's had a great year. If you would have told any of you before the season he's going to have 3,400 yards, 25 touchdowns, 12 picks with 1 game left, you would have raced to sign up for that. You would have blown out your hamstrings given the quarterback play we've seen here since Peyton Manning retired. Is there inconsistency at times? Yes, there is. There is. He's not a perfect prospect. There aren't many like that. For the most part, he makes good decisions with the ball. He plays with an insane competitive fire. He competes in a way that's healthy. He's got leadership qualities that are only going to grow. And I can see him getting better, when they get better weapons around him. If you look at the weapons around Caleb Williams, who's been a disappointment this year, partly because of bad coaching, partly because he holds on to the ball, partly because he gets sacked all the time. But he's got Keenan Allen, DJ Moore, Cole Kmet, and Swift at running back. You don't think that's better what the Broncos are rolling out? Yeah, it is. I'll answer it. I'll hang up and listen. So there's reason for hope, folks. But Bo's got to play well this final game at home. He's used to these big situations, dating to his days at Alabama, dating to his days at Auburn. Days against Alabama at Auburn, and certainly at Oregon. Huge games last year. He didn't win all those games, though, but he's played in huge games in college over 5 years. And it doesn't get any bigger than this. It'll be the latest, biggest game. Broncos needing to beat the Chiefs. And normally, again, we'd say no shot. The Broncos have lost, if you're counting at home, 17 of their last 18 to the Chiefs. They beat them last year in Denver. Russell Wilson didn't play great that game. Then that was the week he was getting benched. Even though he had 3 touchdowns, he had like 114 yards passing, and Payton lost his mind about him and wanted him benched after that. But Nix should have beaten Kansas City, and Kansas City outplayed Patrick Mahomes in their earlier meeting. But it's still the Chiefs, folks. They're 1-17 against the Chiefs. And the defense has issues right now. So as much as I'm like, hey, they're going against Carson Wentz, and if you get schooled by Carson Wentz, you deserve your fate. The defense is just getting absolutely schooled. They're giving up right around 28 points a game over the last 3 games. That's a hard way to win, man. When you're telling your offense to score 30 points, that is Joe Burrow's offense in Cincinnati. That's Sam Darnold with the Vikings. That's the best teams in the league if you're understanding the trend here. The Broncos are not that. There's a reason they're at 9 wins, because they've learned to beat bad teams. And the Chiefs playing the reserves aren't a bad team, but they're not a good team at that point. They're a team you need to beat. So what I would tell you, Broncos country, be mad, be pissed. You had it again. It felt like you should have won it. I understand the argument to go for 2. I would have. I was surprised Payton didn't. The math with the tie figured into it, the momentum, and not being able to close out and finish for the second straight week, it is frustrating. It is. That said, you got one more shot. It's like the Pat McAfee college game day where you get a second kick. The kid that gets to shoot 2 free throws and the contest at a pro basketball game. You have one more opportunity. And no one's going to remember how you got in if you beat the Chiefs. Trust me, 5 years from now, if Bo Nix is a Pro Bowler and they've been to the playoffs 3 times in 5 years or whatever that number is, you're not going to be like, oh, but there was a qualifier in Bo's rookie year. It was against the Chiefs teams not playing Patrick Mahomes. It just fades into memory that who cares? You look it up on Pro Football Reference, and it shows 10-7 playoffs. And you're like, holy crap, 10-7 with a rookie quarterback and eating $53 million on Russell Wilson? So be pissed, be mad, get the Pepto-Bismol ready for next week. Get your Chiefs fatigue and hate going. Hate read about the Chiefs. God knows I'm over the Chiefs, and it's not personal. I have Chiefs fatigue. I've written about that earlier this year. And take a deep breath and realize you have one more chance. And if they don't get in and they lose to the Chiefs, throw the racquetball up against the wall, grind your teeth. All of that's fair game with reframed expectations that you drop your final 3 and one of them at home. But you got one more chance. And I'm saying you got a good chance because of who you're playing, who their quarterback is, because you're at home. I would expect Broncos country to be worked up into a lather. And all that disappointment and anger you felt over these past 2 games, hopefully that translates and manifests into a team and a crowd married in a performance that gets them to the playoffs. I'm rooting for that for you, Broncos country. After the last 8 years, it'd be cool to see there and chronicle an event where they clinch a home playoff berth in front of Broncos country. You guys deserve it. But if these last 2 weeks have taught you anything, you got to earn it. You got to earn it. There are no homecoming opponents in the NFL, and there won't be next week because the Chiefs are well coached. So even if it's the reserves, it's going to be greasy, but you got a chance. So all I can tell you, hang in there. We'll see. One more. And then there was one. Broncos v. Chiefs. Folks, I do this podcast because of my great friends at Mile High Sports, Big A behind the screen, and Nate Lundy. They're the best. And, of course, A1 from day one, my guy, Darby Hoggett, and Bet Online. I could not do the program without their help and support and their time and effort. Broncos country, I do this pod for you. Happiness, that begins with me. Go out there and have a great day.